My name is Rollins Irby, or if you've spent any time around the lab, you know me as Kirby. I am a senior creative technologies major with a minor in art, and I'm also in the honors program, which is made for a whirlwind of a semester. I describe myself as two different things. I am someone who loves to uplift people and someone who loves to make stuff. So it's kind of little wonder that I managed to end up as a lab assistant here. But my journey into creative tech was, boy, it was convoluted. I started out at Barry, which was a spur of the moment to come and visit. Ended up coming here. I mean, I'm right here. But I was an art major coming in. Didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to do art. And then I found art history, and I decided that I loved that. And then I ended up working at the Oak Hill Museum, where I met one lovely, lovely alumni named Bailey Grayson. She wasn't an alumni then, but she was now. She said, "Hey, you're really cool. Why don't you come to a slackathon?" And me, being a second semester freshman, was just like, so I came into the design studio, no idea what I was doing, and I met a bunch of really, really awesome people. I ended up talking to Chris, who said, "Hey, you can join my 103 class. It's coding, it's like learning how to do like game stuff, super fun, you'll love it." And I was like, "Cool." Ended up in there, and by about 5 or 6, I decided I wanted to stay, and well, here I am. So my theme for my portfolio and kind of my overarching time here at Library as a whole is creating environments of learning for hands-on experiences. I love telling people about all of the cool stuff that I get to do here, and even more, I love teaching them how to do the cool stuff that I get to do, which I just want to say, okay, here's all of this really awesome knowledge I've acquired over 2.5 years. Let me teach you how to do it. Because in my life, the biggest thing I learned from this place is learning how to fail. I was really, really failure averse when I first got in here, and 101 kind of beat that out of me with crowbar. Um, but honestly, that's kind of what set me up to do what I want to do now, and what I decided was going to be my way to help people and uplift people. So, going into my first evidence of this, CRT 340. It was an education class that I was in last semester, and it was so much fun. We got to design a ton of different hands-on experiences for a ton of different age groups. This one right here is our thankfulness one. It was around Thanksgiving, and my partner Ansley and I decided to make a fun little tent in the wood shop. So we had our little campfire around, and the whole activity was going around and saying what we were thankful for, kind of teaching what thankfulness was. And then, of course, the kids would get to roast and eat a marshmallow. These are 3-year-olds. If you've ever tried to teach a 3-year-old, it's like herding a cat. You can get it distracted enough to do what you want for like a second, but then you gotta like reel them back in again. So we kind of did that by going around and having participation in each person. So we would have, okay, I'm thankful for, I believe my most useful was my cat. And the next kid would say, oh, I'm thankful for my dog or my toy. Or I think at one point there was an entire group that just focused on food. It was probably the marshmallows now that I think about it. But that was kind of our way to get them thinking about what thankfulness is and how to kind of like think about that in their own lives. And of course, we gave them marshmallows because what is a campfire without marshmallows? To get them kind of into the scene, one of my favorite things that I did about this activity was I had them like march. So I was like, we're gonna go on a hike. We went and like marched over, and it also got them to pick their legs up because coming into this, it was like a couple inches off the ground, and I did not want anyone falling on their faces. So that was just kind of a fun little way. Um, and then once again, the herding cats things, these kids, I have ADHD. I have a very short attention span. These kids beat me by a mile in attention span length. Very small. So we actually had to distract them a little bit. So one of my favorite things to do was we had this little starry projector up here, and we played I Spy. That usually would eat up the last little bits of our time. Going into the next evidence is a experience from the same class, but this one was on light and color and was actually designed for 6-year-olds. Now, if like the 3-year-olds are cats, 6-year-olds are puppies. They want to do good. They want that validation. and they're a little bit easier to keep on task, but like not very. So for this activity, we used a kind of combination of a hands-on um, activity with, you can kind of see a little representation of it here with a sheet of colorful shapes and a binder divider represented by that little moving square. And we use that to show them the different effects of light on color. So we had a really cool little visual presentation of the different wavelengths of light, which were actually also represented by the lights above our heads because we were in the critique space. Or the whatever we call the booths now. I don't quite really know. That's changed so much. But we used a combination of the visuals, kind of showing them how light enters the eye and the wavelengths through which our brain processes it. And this, as you can see now, hey, the yellow kind of disappears. Okay, that's cool. Why? We had another fun little demonstration where I went over into the Mara space. Hi, Mara. And we changed the lights, and actually it changed the color of the shirt I was wearing. So when the lights were in that cool like blues and stuff, the shirt I was wearing didn't really change color. But if you change it to red, it looks more like brown or black. Usually more black because I was wearing a blue shirt. So this kind of got the kids thinking about, okay, how does light enter my eye? We had a really cool picture in, there that goes. We had a really cool picture in our PowerPoint slides of the yellow room. I forget which museum it's in, but it's a room entirely bathed in yellow light, and there's just no color in it. And the kids were like, whoa, how's that happen? So that's when I scampered over to Maria, changed the color of the lights, and that set them up to say, oh, I want to do that, in which we moved to the activity. The last thing this blurry thing. The last evidence I have is my honors thesis. Oh boy. This was so much fun to build. I used Unreal Engine 5 for this, and it was directed by the lovely Chris Whitmire, kind of coming full circle. My first teacher here at CRT, and then my thesis director. Here at Hackberry CRT. But so this is actually a museum. I titled it the Museum of Wandering Stories, and it is a museum that kind of talks about lost and or displaced artifacts. So this is kind of a space that kids, or not kids, people can come in and look really up close at all of these different artifacts that are either, miles across the world different from each other, or you can't really get up close like this and touch them. You use just a standard mouse and keyboard to interact with this place, and each of those little doors that you kind of see over there in my atrium leads to a different exhibit. Right there, that is the first exhibit, the Karates of the, I still don't know how to say the name, it's something in Greek, Erectheon, I believe. Trust me, I've learned like 5 different pronunciations. And it allows you to quite literally get as up close as you want to these models and say, okay, this is really cool. But what if I wanted to know a little bit more? So we have a ton of other models here. Unfortunately, it's too blurry. I've struggled with this GIF, whatever it is, for so long. But you actually can pick these models up, zoom in, and actually say, okay, whoa, you can see some of the dimples and the tool marks in the stone. Or, whoa, I didn't know that this was made of, I believe this is the Horus statue, so it was made of granite. And almost all of these artifacts actually have a little text box, and the ones that don't are the like giant ones, like the multiple karates over there. But these kind of allow people to go in and say, oh, this is a really, really cool museum that's leading me on these different stories and showing, these places that I might not have been able to see. So that leads me to my capstone. When thinking about my capstone, I had already used a really good idea for my thesis. And I was like, okay, what do I hate about Hackberry Lab? The answer was not a lot. So then I was just like, okay, what do I dislike about Hackberry Lab? And it was the resin printing space. So my capstone I titled Resin Redo, and it was recreating the resin printing space to better serve Hackberry Lab. The 2 impacts that I really, really wanted this to do was return resin printing to Hackberry Lab and creating the space to better serve students. I was one of 2 people who knew how to do resin printing for a very long time. Silas taught me, and then I ended up teaching Kaya, one of our student lab directors, just this past semester. And a lot of people were just like, whoa, we have resin printing? I didn't know about that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that phrase overdoing this. So this is the old resin printing space. And that's what I didn't like. Just all of it. It was really intimidating and kind of like, oh, that's a big giant 3D printer that's like right here on me. And oh, why is that resin printer up here? And what are those doing? And what is that? And why is there open resin there? I just decided, okay, let's fix that. So over there is my new resin space. And kind of three things that I wanted to do for increasing the use of this was creating the environment to be approachable, having increased visibility, and then word of mouth has been so, so helpful in having people come up to me and say, hey, this is resin printing, right? I want to do this. So this space actually is about the same height as the other lab tables. It's braced underneath with 2x4 to prevent bowing and kind of shaking a little bit. And it's actually on top of two IKEA cabinets that I modified to fit it a little bit better. Which is kind of just screwing the dowel sense, but we don't talk about that. I lost track of what I was saying. Can you tell that I'm very scatterbrained? Actually, in increasing this use, and getting the things in progress of creating a capstone, we actually helped, or we actually had the advanced kids, kind of design things to come in and therefore use the 3D printers. At that point, I believe it was Zane who did all of the printing, and I said, okay, that's cool. What if we got lab assistants on that? So I believe the plan for this is to have the lab directors at least, and maybe some of the senior lab assistants know how to use this. And that leads to my streamlining. So the one thing I really hated about the resin printing is that all of these were different tools, but also just stuff in here. And I decided, okay, I hate that. I'm so scatterbrained that I had to call this Kirby proofing. And I went through and I said, oh, let's streamline these drawers and have step-by-step guides of, okay, this is step one, this is step two, this is step three. So my three steps were removal, cleaning, and curing. For the removal, I have our lovely little baking trays, which we use to keep the resin off the surface of the table. And our scrapers. We have another resin tray. You can kind of see a little bit of it back there, which is used for once you're done with the cleaning. So it's kind of like, I believe Mariah told me the analogy of like the fried chicken. Yeah. And finally, I have the curing, which just has, one of the actual turntables. But also on the top, you can actually see we have one of the little resin vats. Oh, I did a thing. Okay, cool. I thought there was a laser on this. There probably is.
It's the big giant button.
The big giant button. Okay. So kind of hidden there, but you can see it a little bit better here. There are alcohol vats. Those actually, you have to take them off for a curing station. So this little drawer here is primarily more of a space to store our turntables so they don't just get tossed out into the ether. Also, just kind of having a dedicated maintenance cabinet versus having a dedicated like tools cabinet. Some of the stuff down here used to be like, oh, there were some of our add-ins, and oh, there was some of our like, you need the for the old printer, you had to use an Allen wrench or a hex key to, I can't remember which one's which, to unturn or to loosen, and it was a whole process. So that's why I decided to have everything all in one place, so I wouldn't have to run back and forth across the lab if I wanted to just do a simple resin print. And then finally, I have a dedicated computer for this. You can kind of see it right there. And this actually runs our slicer, which is Chi2Box. So Chi2Box is the dedicated Elegoo or created by Elegoo slicer, and it has profiles for all three of the printers that are somewhat within use. Our two big, lovely, giant Saturn IVs and our Mars, in case someone wants to do like some really cool like add-ins and stuff. Also, with our Saturn printers, we have basic resin. You don't use the colored resin and add-ins and that, just keep them kind of clean. And it's our white filament, as I've heard it called by Zane a couple times. And this just kind of allows people to say, okay, I want a resin print. And there's no, okay, as a lab assistant, let me go get my computer. Okay, put your thing on the file server. Okay, let me slice it and download it, and then finally go back over and stick it on the printer. It's all in one spot. You can just do it really easily right there. And finally, safety. That's open resin. I have a stain on my lab assistant hoodie to where I spilled it one time all over myself, and I was just like, "Uh-oh, that's not good." And another time, it actually spilled out all over the floor. So I decided I wanted that to not be a thing anymore. So I actually have a dedicated little resin cabinet down here where we have all of our extra bottles of resin. And then finally, just having this as a lab assistant only workspace. Yeah, you say, okay, I want this to be a place where people can come and resin print. Resin printing is a very messy process. Um, so it's good to have people actually hands on doing it that are people who really are dedicated and know how to do it. Especially with cleaning up the surface, you have to really clean the tables if you or the baking trays if you want them to not be sticky because I could go in there on the old one and that entire surface right here would just be you could stick your hand down and you could just feel it. And I was just like, ugh. Cannot tell you how many times I cleaned that thing off, how messy it got every single time I cleaned it off. And finally, just resin is like you don't want that on you. So having people that are dedicated to using the best practices and saying, okay, I need to have gloves on at all times, not disregard my own safety like I do mine sometimes, but oh well. Um, and people just having the knowledge and the skill to do this and say, this is something that we can do for you. It is not, the thing you can do yourself unless you are very, very, very specially trained and get approval by the powers that be, aka probably Zane and Mariah and Chris. Um, and yeah, that was my capstone. So what's next for me? Rest. I've done two ginormous projects this semester and I need a second. My family and I are actually planning on doing a really cool vacation for my graduation and my brother finishing up his freshman year of college. And then finally, I want to go and work for 6 months. I eventually want to be a teacher, either at the kind of like high school, college level, teaching people the really awesome stuff we do here. Um, so what I really want to do is I'm going to work for about 6 months and then return to school for my master's and then hopefully eventually my doctorate. But we're looking at like 5 or 6 years right now, so master's it is. So yeah, that is the craziness that I was allowed to do. Thank you guys so much for listening to me yap about this. And if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.